Hello, fellow LATE 2600 students. I'm Professor Taylor. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. I'm Jared Watkins, and this is the 15 most beneficial things I have learned. So first up is criminal profiling. Profiling, or known as criminal profiling, is a new term I learned while taking this class. It can also be called profiling and refers to any police-initiated action that uses a compilation of physical, behavior, motivational characteristics to identify individuals as being or have been having potential to engage in criminal activity. Criminal profiling is a legitimate investigative instrument that can be used by law enforcement officers. So next is hate crime versus hate incident. I knew what a hate crime was, but I did not know there was a difference between hate crime and hate incident. A hate crime is a criminal offense committed against a person's property or a society that has been motivated by an offender's bias against race, color, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity. And a hate incident involves behaviors that are not criminal acts, but motivated by a victim's race, color, sexual orientation, gender identity. Both are immoral, but the main difference between the two is a hate crime is a criminal offense while an incident is not. So next is nonverbal communication, which is also a new term I learned. It's a communication style that involves gestures, position of feet, facial expression, eye contact, physical or conversational distance, anything that really just not speech in general. Its importance varies between different cultures. Our textbook gives us conflict resolution tips, which are used to de-escalate conflicts using communication and not violence. The first one is to note that anger is a normal feeling. Second is how we handle our anger can make the difference between managing conflict effectively and having conflict end in violence. 3 is to also be aware of triggers. Number 4, triggers are like lightning bolts. When they strike, they can interfere with communication. Number 5 is pay attention to your own behavior. Even body language can be important. Number 6 is note that people already use strategies to control their anger. And this could help people and it couldn't some others. Number 7 is to resolve a conflict, you must stay calm and communicate. Communication is very important. Number 8 is less hot the anger, the more you can control it, which basically means the less angry someone is, they're easier to control in conversation. Number 9 is, though your anger may be legitimate, the other person will take it more seriously if you remain calm. If you get angry, they will get angry, they will take you less seriously. And number 10, the goal is to communicate your wants and needs effectively without threatening others. So next is verbal decommunication, and in the same chapter we learned about this, and it refers to the act of decreasing intensity or volume of a conflict through communication style that deflects anger and calms an aggressive person. This is a very useful tactic for police officers that helps them calm people down in stressful situations. So each culture has their own type of communication context. It can be low or high context communication. High context communication is indirect, implicit, and people will take many of their cues from the context rather than the words you speak out of your mouth. It includes like setting, body language, levels of hierarchy. And low communication, just the opposite. It relies more on words to create meaning and is more direct and implicit. So people who speak limited English in our multicultural society, is important for officers to know how to speak to limited English speakers, and is important to know that a listener can easily misinterpret speech patterns. A non-English speaker can also easily misunderstand words. And a listener should use multiple indicators when interpreting what a limited English speaker is trying to say to avoid conflict. So before taking this class, I never knew the difference between these groups. Refugees are people who fear prosecution and death in their countries of origin because of war or violence. Immigrants are those who have voluntarily left their countries of origin in order to join family members or benefit and make better lives for themselves. Asylum seekers are people who have escaped their country of origin because of well-founded fears of prosecution. These are all important terms to know. I always knew what a gang was, but I didn't know the three most common types of gangs, and those currently, according to our textbook, are street gangs, prison gangs, and outlaw motorcycle gangs. So there are different types of racism discussed in our textbook. So personally, meditated racism was brought to my attention. It is attitudes based on stereotypes and biases that leads to prejudice and discrimination. Institutional racism is generally the failure of an organization or public or private service to provide goods and services based on opportunities to people based on their color or cultural or ethnic origin. And internalized racism is when personal conscious or subconscious acceptance of the dominant society's view and biases towards protected classes of people. So another interesting factor I learned from the class that is very useful, I think it was at the beginning of the semester, we learned that the United States is more of a mosaic instead of a melting pot. This is because America has never been homogeneous, but is a mosaic because all the parts come together to make a whole instead of a melting pot. In a mosaic, all the pieces are together and they make one giant piece of artwork. So there's also pros and cons to data collection. Data collection, in this case, I'm referring used to combat racially biased policing in law enforcement. So the benefits can determine whether racially biased policing is a problem. It can also convey commitment to unbiased policing, take productive approach towards rooting out racial profiling, and then it can also effectively allocate and manage department resources. But the cons include data collection can sometimes not yield the nature of what it's supposed to. It can also harm the agency and its personnel. And data collection, some say data collection could be used to impact police productivity, morale, and workload. And some also say it can be used to combat racially profiled policing in better ways instead of data collection. So communication across all backgrounds. It's very important to know how to speak and communicate to people of all backgrounds. That you can encounter people of different backgrounds everywhere in your life. You should always remember that people want to be respected, no matter what culture or ethnic group they are a part of. It's also better to provide options rather than make threats to people when you're communicating with them. And it is also important to know that all people would like to have a second chance, whether it's in life or in your communication when you're talking with them in a conversation. So interviewing and data gathering skills are a great skill to have as a law enforcement officer. Strategies to effective interviewing and data collecting include establishing personal relationships to gain trust and rapport. Bringing structure to the conversation helps you control it. Gain information about the problem that required presence of a police officer. Give information about police guidelines and different resources. Provide action and intervention as needed, and support different parties' ability to solve problems on their own. And then lastly is a very important one, prevention of racial profiling in law enforcement. This is very, very important, and the class presented many effective strategies. So departments should have accountability, supervision, self-assessment. The agency should have policies to prevent racial profiling. Recruitment and hiring should be very selective. Education is very important. Training and minority community outreach is also very important. So that is it. Thank you for watching my presentation, and everyone stay safe and healthy.